What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Down Once More. I'm your host, Matt, and we are now halfway through April, and I was struggling with figuring out what to talk about on this week's episode, and I decided today to scroll Broadway HD and see what is a pro shot that's on here that I don't have much familiarity with, that I can devote a couple hours to, watch, do a little bit of research, and talk about. And the first one I landed on was Bat Out of Hell, the musical. Now, this was one that kind of stood out to me because a while back on YouTube, I had stumbled across the Sits probe of this, which is the first rehearsal where the cast members kind of sing with the live musicians and band for the first time, get tempos right, cues, things like that. They filmed the Sits probe of the 2025 revival of this in 2024 when they were working on it with an audience, and that is out on YouTube. So that doesn't have any of the staging, the blocking. So I'd watched a little bit of that. And so it kind of stood out to me when I was scrolling through what was available on Broadway HD. It was a newer drop on Broadway HD. They were the ones that actually sponsored the pro shot of it. And so I decided to give that a shot, check it out. And I was not quite prepared for what I was getting myself into. So let's talk about the history of this show a little bit. So it originally was billed as Jim Steinman's Bat Out of Hell, the musical. Now, Bat Out of Hell may sound familiar to you as being a series of Meat Loaf albums. There was a trilogy of Bat Out of Hell albums from the late 70s. Meat Loaf, most famously known, at least for people my age, for I could do anything for love, but I won't do that. That whole fun song spawned countless memes, jokes throughout time. Also, for his role as Eddie in Rocky Horror Picture Show. And we talked about him in a musical movie review not that long ago on this podcast, Stage Fright, which I actually really enjoyed his role in that. But Bat Out of Hell is the music of Jim Steinman. So the music, lyrics, and book for this musical are all by Jim Steinman. And the majority of songs for this musical, you're just going to bear with me when I give the history of it, because it's kind of a jukebox musical, but not really. It's almost more like the Meat Loaf albums were concept albums, proof of concept for this musical. Because this story is a very, very loose retelling of the story of Peter Pan. And I kind of have to go into the history of how Jim Steinman came up with this. And it all started back in 1968 while he was at Amherst College. He wrote a newspaper article kind of about the contemporary issues of the time. It was kind of dark, and he turned it into a rock musical titled The Dream Engine. And now they did some productions of it at the college. And in 1969, the rights were bought by Joseph Papp of the New York Shakespeare Festival. And Steinman was kind of set to kind of refine it and turn it into a larger work, but that never really came to fruition and panned out. Now, in 1973, Papp had Steinman work on the rock musical More Than You Deserve, and that's where Steinman met Meat Loaf. They started working together. In 1974, Steinman told Papp that the Dream Engine had turned into Neverland, this musical, bigger musical that was getting off the ground, but he couldn't quite get the rights from the estate of J.M. Barrie, who wrote Peter Pan, to put the musical on as is because of how heavily influenced it was and the explicit character names of the Peter Pan characters. So then, after that, while working with Meat Loaf through the time 74, 75, 76, Steinman wrote most of the lyrics and the songs for Meat Loaf's Bat Out of Hell album that he put out. In 1977, they did a workshop of Neverland in Washington, D.C., so some revisions made to it and early workings of that show. And they did that in summer of 77, and then in September of 77 is when Meat Loaf's Bat Out of Hell album released. and kind of took off. And then in the late 90s, so after that, there were 3 different Bat Out of Hell albums. It was a trilogy of albums, if you will. In the late 90s, the musical Neverland was then rewritten into a film script that was called Bat Out of Hell 2100, and it had a lot of Peter Pan references. It had like Officer Captain Hook, George Darling, Wendy, Pan, everything like that. And that obviously didn't take off, but that featured a lot of songs from Steinman's early work, as well as the Bat Out of Hell albums. And then in 2008, it was officially announced that Bat Out of Hell, the musical, was going to be coming out. Now, there wasn't a lot of movement or news on it until 2015. They did a developmental lab, and then they announced the cast in 2016, and then it premiered in Manchester in 2017. After that, they had some showings. They did a North American tour of 2018. It's when the U.S. got its first taste of it. 2019, it had a very short off-Broadway run. It had some Vegas concerts that they did of it. In 2020 and 2023, they did an international tour. And then 2025, they had a UK revival tour. And that is what was ultimately filmed and turned into this proshot that is available on Broadway HD. So that's why I said it's technically a jukebox musical because it is featuring Jim Steinman's music that was released independently, but the very earliest onsets of so much of this music was the musical that Steinman was trying to create. So it was always intended to be a musical, and that was the dream and the vision beyond it, and he just finally was able to make it happen in 2017. Officially produced. And then Steinman passed away in 2021, and Meat Loaf passed away in 2022, or might have those transposed. So they got to see a little bit of its success and come to fruition. It's kind of the culmination of a lot of Steinman's work. Jim Steinman, I was not aware of this, and that's partially because of my own just kind of ignorance of this music at the time. But Steinman, behind so many of the greatest hits that we know, Total Eclipse of the Heart, Making Love Out of Nothing at All by Air Supply, which is featured in this musical. And then the one that was shocking to me was It's All Coming Back to Me Now, the famous by Celine Dion. And that was actually, Celine Dion was covering it. It was originally a song from Steinman's project, Pandora's Box. Fun fact. It's All Coming Back to Me Now, also featured in Bat Out of Hell, the musical. Now, that's some history of this musical as a whole. Let's talk about some of the key players, key roles in this. And I will say, I'm not going to be going a super in-depth dive of the musical itself, but I will be talking some spoilers about it. The main characters, main player, Strat, is kind of the Peter Pan character in this world. In the proshot, it's played by Glenn Adamson. He's the leader of the gang called The Lost. So, like the Lost Boys, there's the Peter Pan reference. It's a group of teenagers who, when there was chemical warfare, 25 years prior to the events of this story taking place, they ended up being their genes kind of frozen in time, so they're all stuck at 18 years old. So stuck at this late teen stage of life. Then there's Raven, who in the proshot is played by Katie Tonkinson, who is going to be in The Greatest Showman, that UK premiere of the stage musical later this year, I believe is when that makes its debut. So be excited to see that. But she plays Raven, who is the daughter of Falco, who is played by Rob Fowler in this. Falco is the city's dictator. We're introduced to Raven on the eve of her 18th birthday, and she finds herself longing and falling in love with Strat after meeting eyes with him after a disturbance outside of her father's towers. Now, this is an issue with Peter Pan in general. Is it problematic that the central love story is between someone who is 18 forever and has been 18 for 25 years, so basically like a 43-year-old, and someone who is 17 just turning 18? Yeah, little bit sketchy, problematic. But the main crux of the story doesn't happen until after she's 18. So I guess it makes it slightly less weird, but not really. Other main characters in it, Sloane, portrayed by Sharon Sexton. She's Falco's wife and obviously Raven's mom. She is one of the central driving forces of the kind of balancing from Falco's past and how she used to be young and rebellious as well and can tap into that more carefree nature of Falco before he turned into this kind of ruthless, power-hungry dictator, and kind of relates to Raven a little bit more and helps her get her freedom throughout the course of the show. Now, there's also characters within the Lost. Main ones are going to be Zahara, Jaguar, also referred to as Jag, and then Tink, who is Tinkerbell, another Peter Pan nod there. But Tink is talked about was frozen before everyone else, so kind of in the awkward stage. So prior to 18 is what's implied, because there's lots of talks about Tink just being a kid, which makes it even weirder when Tink kisses Strat. But we're not getting hung up on that. I said we're not going to get hung up on that. But just be aware that it's weird, and I'm acknowledging that it is weird and probably a little problematic. So let's get into the story. The story that is telling, like I said, loosely Peter Pan. Basically, Strat, Raven, meet. Strat has a longing for Raven. Raven has a longing for Strat. Believes she's in love with him. Wants to run away. Strat, Raven end up running away. Raven has second thoughts. Strat drives motorcycle off of a cliff. Dies. End of Act 1. Boom. Dead. Act 2, and I did say I was getting into spoilers. Act 2 is Falco, Raven, kind of blaming Falco for Strat's death, feeling sad, lonely. Zahara brings Raven to Strat. Strat's still alive. Yay. Tink, jealous of Strat and Raven. Tink betrays Strat to Falco. Falco accidentally shoots Tink, kills Tink, but not really. And then Strat sends Raven away, then goes back, brings Raven to him, and ends up everyone has a happy ending. Did that make sense? No? Perfect. Because that's how I felt watching this movie. The songs, so fun. The numbers, a good time. But the staging, a little bit chaotic. The filming of it, definitely not up there with the best pro shots. I think Star Kid has some better pro shots out there than this. That's not a knock on Star Kid. Star Kid does amazing work, especially on their newer ones with a higher production level. Like, damn. But I was so confused as to what was happening for the first 15-20 minutes of this show. It opens up with a monologue that harkens, like, there's no better way to put it. Like, I wrote down my first note is this feels like Maureen's performance in Rent. Maureen's performance on the lot. The I'm forbidden to produce boom, milk. It's a spoken word, love and death in the American guitar, which is a Jim Steinman original from one of his albums. And so it is a spoken word story about first introduction to rock and roll. And the way that Katie Tonkinson plays this role, which she's supposed to be 17, is very energetic while also being juvenile and does the vocal kind of pitch all over the place. Like when you're an adult trying to sound like a child or like a baby, that was a little bit off-putting at times. But this opening monologue, like I said, it felt very much like Maureen's performance. And I'm not saying it was bad. It was just a very odd way to start this. And then going right into All Revved Up with No Place to Go and Wasted Youth, which is kind of this chaotic, the grap between Strat and the Lost and Falco's soldiers, which are wearing body armor and like skull masks. And then it's cutting to shots of Sloane in Falco's tower with Raven, like laying in the bed. And it was just very all over the place and choppy and disjointed. And I had no idea what was going on. Because while these songs themselves do tell a story, I didn't feel like they told a very well connected story. Songs individually, a lot of fun, a lot of energy, a good time. I did not feel like they wove seamlessly together. It very much, even though I said Steinman had been creating this musical back from the beginning, it very much felt like a jukebox musical and not really a very well done jukebox musical, in my humble opinion, where it felt like, okay, we're going to put this song here. We're going to put a little bit of book, a little bit of story between it. It's not going to be the strongest thing. It's not going to make that much sense. We are expecting a lot from the audience because there is not very much context given. Like I said, there's not really anything told about Strat and the Lost and who they are until about 15 minutes in, with some dialogue, some context, exposition dump between Sloane and Raven in a conversation that's still not really clear. And they're referring to, like, she's calling them the Lost. You don't know who the Lost are. Like I said, the monologue that opens it up just is unrelated, and it's more, I think it's probably in there as like a love song to rock and roll, right? Or a love story. The first interaction with rock and roll. I am not a very conceptual person when it comes to my musicals. I do sometimes have to get hit on the head with it, and this is what we are doing. This is what we're telling you. So this is maybe not the musical for me. I also did not grow up on Jim Steinman's music, Meat Loaf's music. That was not my era. That's not what I go to. Something I will say about this, it's about a little over 2 hours long, and Glenn Adamson as Strat is 110% committed. He is giving all of his effort, his energy. It is a kind of crazed performance because he's playing this kind of boy who never grew up, just like Peter Pan, someone stuck at 18, stuck in kind of that immaturity, juvenile nature, a little bit crazed, and then a bat out of hell when it's talking about his heart flying away out of his chest like a bat out of hell. He has blood speared on him, and he like licks it. It's not for me, but just gives a truly wild performance, giving his entire effort and energy into it. He does play it like a kind of creepy, crazed 18-year-old, but there was just something off-putting about the scenes between Strat and Raven and how they communicated to each other that just, I don't know. The book did nothing for me in this show. The story did nothing for me. The musical numbers are fun. The set and the costumes are very unique. It's a very like post-apocalyptic, dystopian kind of grunge vibe and feel. Jaguar, his outfit is like patchwork, like joggers, a San Francisco 49ers football jersey, short leather vest, and a leopard headband. Well, you know what? It's probably a Jaguar headband. Now that I think about that. I'm like, oh, leopard print headband. But no, his name is Jaguar. But not spelled like the cat Jaguar. It was Jagwire, Wire. So, fun note there. But the music is a lot of fun. And so I will be completely honest. I found my mind wandering during the story parts. It did not have me hooked at all. I was not invested. I didn't care about that. I was just waiting to get to the next musical number, which Are any of these performances, oh my God, that is the most amazing thing I have ever heard? Probably not. But they're all giving it their all, 100%. And I felt like Glenn Addison's performance in Bat Out of Hell was amazing. It was his time to shine and kind of close out the first act with that whole scene and just wild performance that he gives. And then Katie Tompkinson's kind of opening up the second act very quick after it starts with Heaven Can Wait. She hit some amazing notes in there that I really enjoyed. Not a perfect performance, but I really enjoyed that song and that rendition. Jag also is not credited on IMDb, and I didn't catch it at the end of the film. So apologies, I can't shout out that actor. I really enjoyed the songs that Jaguar sang as well on it. But overall, I was thinking about like how to tie together my thoughts on this musical and if I would recommend it to anyone. And I feel like that's very difficult to say. If you are a fan of Meat Loaf's music, then you're going to love the music in it, obviously, and you're going to love the energy that they bring. However, the story is so kind of disconcerting and weird and difficult to follow at times. I will say it gets easier to follow once you get into it, but man, it's hard. I almost stopped watching and went to find something else, but then I stayed committed, and I'm glad I saw it through because by the end I was having a lot of fun. And that was maybe because that's when I got into more of the songs that I already knew, but I did have fun watching this at the end. I had a lot of what the fuck moments. Like my very first two sets of notes back to back, like the 1-2 punch was this monologue to open the show feels like Maureen's performance from Rent. Cause she's talking about using a guitar. She's not sure if it was a Starcaster or a Stratocaster, and killing people with it. And so that was my first note. And then it was, I have no idea what's happening in this musical. So those are my two notes. And the other thing that I found very kind of distracting and took away from me on this pro shot is all of the lead characters with their performances are holding the stick mics. And so to me, that took away from their performance. Like there were times when Strat is during Bat Out of Hell, especially they're on the motorcycle and he's trying to gesture, but he's having to hold the mic with one hand and then he'd switch back and forth and it became distracting. Now, there were times when they used it as a prop, wrapping the cord of the mic around their necks, things like that. There's one part at the end too, which just sound mixing stage made no sense. Falco, Rob Fowler's character, has a mic and he's swinging it and you can hear like that the sound team, they didn't like cut that mic before he starts doing it. So you can hear kind of like the whooshing and kind of chunking on it. And it was distracting to me. So there were some choices like that were odd. I don't know the original staging blocking, if that was a thing forever, if it was a choice they made for the 2025 revival. There's sometimes that I feel like that can work. In Jesus Christ Superstar, some of the performances I have seen, there have been moments when that works. I mean, there's always like King Herod's song. He usually has a mic and does a little bit more. I think maybe I'm just thinking of the Hollywood Bowl performance too with Josh. No, he didn't have a mic. I don't know what the fuck I'm thinking about. But I know I've seen certain musicals where it can work into the staging and feel more natural. This didn't for me. It felt forced. There were times when one person's holding it and then they'd hold it for the other person to sing into or talk into it. Maybe it had something to do with the pro shot. Maybe that's not how it was on the whole tour. I don't know. The constant use of stick mics I found distracting. And also, minor thing, costuming, the wig work, the lace work on the wigs was not the greatest. You could see those lines like crazy during it. So that's what, like, it was a little bit more distracting and felt a little bit more amateurish of a pro shot. But besides that one swinging mic issue, the sound was very well done. So I don't want to just sound like a picky person here, because I have long been championing we need more pro shots of musicals. So I am so glad that this pro shot exists. That being said, like, it kind of, you know what, it gave me a little bit vibes of Repo the Genetic Opera. Like, these are all different genres of musicals, but I feel like if you're a fan of like Repo the Genetic Opera or even Rocky Horror, which is nothing like Rocky Horror, but like some of those vibes, like a little bit cheesy, extremely over the top. Like the performances are over the top. Even the Broadway HD write-up of it says this over the top musical. Like, it is over the top. It is extra. It's not for everyone, but there's a lot of fun energy going on. The songs are very fun. The one thing this made me want to do is go listen to some old Meat Loaf music. And that's something, I don't have a single Meat Loaf song on any of my playlists. And now I probably will. So I'd say it's worth your time. I wouldn't say go subscribe to Broadway HD just to watch this. But if you have Broadway HD, you're looking for something, check it out. I think it is worth it, but just know you're going to be like, what the fuck is happening multiple times in the beginning. So that's that. I don't really have much else to say. I think overall, the songs are a lot of fun. The energy that the cast brings, especially the main ensemble, the main performers, is a lot of fun. Not a perfect musical, 100% not for everyone. But if you can get behind a weak book, and just have some fun jukebox musical time in some dystopian New York called Obsidian, then hey, this is for you. Or if you just love Meat Loaf. And it's also kind of funny because there's probably some people who are listening to this podcast who are in the younger demographic who have no idea who the fuck Meat Loaf is. And so this is probably not for you. If you're just listening to this, like if you're like, Heathers is my favorite musical ever, you may, well, actually, no, that's a poor comp, because Heathers is based on a musical from like the 80s. So disregard, whatever. No, I don't want to make generalizations or discriminatory statements based on age. So maybe this is for you if you're looking for something with a lot of energy and extremely over the top, that you'll be a little bit like, what the fuck did I just watch? After you watch it, watch Bat Out of Hell, the musical. And that's it. Whenever you do that, before you do that, it's more important you do it before. Go subscribe to Down Once More Pod on YouTube. Hit the download button on your favorite podcast platform. Download the episode. Show some love in the comments. Throw a like on it. Go over to our Instagram at Down Once More Pod. Subscribe. Share the pod. Share the love. I do think I will be bringing back Love Island reviews this summer, which is going to be fun. We're going to be having Love Island and House of the Dragon going at the same time. So we're going to be in for a wild summer. So thank you all for those of you who tuned in. If there's other random musicals that you know that are pro shots, I was scrolling through the Broadway HD category. There's a lot of random ones that I've not seen before or even heard of. If you have experience with these and you're recommending them, drop it in the comments, DM me on Instagram. That's what I might do on some of these solo ones, is get some of the more obscure musicals and do that for a solo review. Upcoming musical reviews, I'm hoping to see a community theater production of Something Rotten next weekend, and we'll probably talk about that a little bit on here. I've got Suffs coming up beginning of May, and the pro shot of that is going to be out on PBS Great Performances on May 7th. I'm going to do a review of Mean Girls, the musical, with Sage. And so that will be coming up. And I think I'm going to start doing every couple months, have Brad come on and do a musical from our childhood. So the one that popped in my head lately was Rock-a-Doodle. So I think we might have to talk Rock-a-Doodle at some point in the coming months. So if you were a kid of the 90s and know that musical, that's one you won't want to miss. So thank you all. Love y'all. Don't forget to go down once more. Later.